Welcome to the podcast Studio Steen, Inspiring Leadership. I learned in my life the importance of being inspired by others and to be surrounded by people who bring you new insights and perspectives. That is the way to grow as a leader and human being in challenging and changing times. In these podcast series, I bring you the latest innovations on personal development and leadership told from business managers, CEOs, spiritual leaders, and people who live their true story. I am your host, Steen Stas, executive coach and absolutely addicted to podcast making. Today, my guest is Bart Weetjens, and I'm very honored to have him in my show today. Bart Weetjens is a Belgian ZEN teacher and a celebrated social entrepreneur. In 1995, he founded the non-governmental organization Apopo, which saves human lives by training rats to detect landmines and TBC all over the world. Since 2015, Bart has been involved in the Wellbeing project. He founded La Terre, a permaculture wellbeing center in the French Ardennes. And since the coronacrisis, he focuses his life on giving workshops and coachings for leaders and entrepreneurs. And in that perspective, he works on innerpreneurship, a new concept that we will develop more in this podcast. So Bart has been practicing Zen for more than 30 years and is an ordained monk in the Sotoshu tradition. I hope I pronounced that well, Bart. And dear listener, in this podcast, you will be inspired by the extraordinary life of Bart as a social entrepreneur, the challenges that brings for a leader. And also, you will learn more about the Zen practice, learn more about the importance of self-care and self-development and inner well-being. So welcome, Bart. It is really an honor to have you here in my show today. And to start, how are you doing today?
I'm doing very well. We just had a glitch with the internet, which is kind of indicating how dependent we are on these technologies, and that's kind of interesting.
It is, isn't it? So the show today will be about leadership and inner well-being, but maybe we can, for the listener, to explain a little bit more about your history. How did you become a social entrepreneur? Because you're well known in that world, and the organization that you founded was quite a big one. How did you end up being a social entrepreneur in your life?
Yeah, well, first of all, social entrepreneur is a label that I carry. And I didn't even know of the existence of social entrepreneurship until I think 2003, when I was in Washington for a World Bank Development Marketplace competition that I won, with which we could then get some funding to start the tuberculosis detection rats. I learned about an organization there, an organization called Ashoka. Ashoka that basically promotes, invests, and celebrates people who have systems changing approaches to social injustices and environmental injustices. And okay, it's kind of a recognition, an award, and a community of support. In my case, the systemic injustice that I looked at was the structural barrier that landmines form in the global south. Subsistence farmers are completely dependent on expensive imported know-how and goods, technologies that are operated by Westerners, experts coming in the country, and to solve a problem. But in the meantime, these communities of subsistence farmers have fled from their villages because of suspicion of landmines, and they live in refugee camps, in informal settlements around major cities, and remain in a state of poverty, really. So my approach, and this was kind of unique in that time, whereas there was an international call for new technologies for the mine action community, especially detection technologies. And whereas at that time, every engineering department of every university in the world almost had a kind of research program into novel technologies, my approach was one where I looked, well, I'm a product designer by training. I studied product ontwikkeling in Antwerp, and my approach was different in the sense that I chose to put myself in the situation of a subsistence farmer. And from that, and looked at what potential resources they would have at hand to solve that issue of this threat of landmines, to solve that more independently from expensive imported know-how and goods. Yeah.
What was your inner drive at that moment? Because you said you're a product designer. You could have gone to Tesla to develop a new car, or what was the inner drive that made you choose to help people having a better life without landmines? What was your drive?
Yeah. Well, I never, I knew I would never be happy in an economy that was, well, linear, yeah. Extraction, production, consumption, disposal. And well, already when I was a student, there was, I mean, of course, the environmental issues are not new. And well, we could choose in product design, we could choose whether we would focus on consumer goods or investment goods or appropriate technologies. And that's what I chose. And this motivation really came from a deep connection with African culture.
Okay.
So when I grew up, and as my brothers left the house, the rooms free were hosting African students that came mainly to the Tropical Institute in Antwerp for short courses.
Yeah.
And so I got a lot of exposure to African culture. I learned a lot. I had a lot of admiration for this vibrant, well, lots of stories I heard about Africa. So I also wanted to travel there as soon as I could, and which I did. And while traveling, not only I was very inspired by African culture, and in particular the collective of African cultures, because there's a huge diversity. We speak of Africa, but of course it's like a huge diversity of various cultures. But what they all have in common is that they're based on a collective. So the basic imperative or paradigm, existential paradigm, is where ours is based on a Cartesian thought of like my reason of existence is the fact that I can rationally think. In Africa, what I experienced is that the reason of existence is based on the interaction between people, the interconnectivity between people, the interdependence. And that makes total sense, because if you're a subsistence farmer and you're like completely depending on the elements, then you really need a strong bonding. You really need to live in community. Otherwise, you simply don't survive. That particular thing is for me like an incredibly strong, imperative, really, that we Westerners can learn a lot from indigenous communities. Something that, well, the individualism here in Europe, in the United States, let's say in the Western world, is kind of disconnected, and this boundless individualism, I see it as a source of a lot of suffering. Whereas those people, and I constantly refer to subsistence farmer communities, where there is a really strong bonding. There is no loneliness. There is no isolation, or very rarely. And if somebody is lonely or isolated, immediately group members will come in and support.
Yeah.
There's an incredible solidarity that we Westerners can learn from.
Did you experience that kind of loneliness or separateness yourself in your youth, or what was the reason that you were so attracted to that this
Yeah,
individualism that we have here in the West?
likely.
Yeah.
Yes, my youth wasn't really very happy, I have to say. I didn't grow up in a safe environment. Yeah, so also on that aspect, I think I admired the collective in the African culture, the Ubuntu. My reason of existence is the fact that you or we exist as a group. Yeah, I think that's probably because of the fact of missing essential needs in my early childhood that I was so much admiring collectivity. Yeah.
Let's go a little bit further in your life. What made you, because you're a Zen teacher, which I don't associate immediately with Africa. How did that aspect came into your life of Zen?
Well, that came actually a long time before really engaging in social entrepreneurship.
Okay.
So because of the fact that I didn't really grow up in a safe environment, as soon as I could, I broke free from that violent environment, and I worked to pay a room as a student in Antwerp, and I came into this rather bohemian environment of the Academy of Arts in Antwerp, and whereas I hadn't learned healthy boundaries, I completely submerged in the world of sex and drugs and rock and roll.
Okay.
And yeah, after a few years, it went awry in the sense of I was experimenting with drugs and got an overdoses, landed in psychiatry, got into an isolation cell for 6 weeks. And yeah, it was an awful time because I thought this will never come right again. I also I feared I would be kicked off the design school in Antwerp. But that didn't happen. My mentor and professor in sociology and philosophy and psychology, Mick Billet, who was at that time the director of the design school, he really took this on and he invited everybody who was involved in the drug scene at a productontwikkeling at that time. I'm talking now the late 80s. And he really invited us to have a serious look at what we were doing with our lives. And he invited me back in school. And in the end, I didn't really lose a year even. But it was really very difficult for me to get my mind and body back together, to find unity. And that is where I met Zen practice initially. Simply on an ad that I found in the supermarket. I saw a poster, like a picture of Taizen Deshimaru sitting in meditation. And I had already intellectually learned about Buddhism and what that was. But then I have to say that picture impressed me very much, the stability of that person, where I was in kind of all mental states, right? So this long before the time of mobile phones. I actually, you remember we had these paper ads where you had printed phone numbers. I ripped off one of those phone numbers, and one telephone call later, I learned that there was a practice place a few kilometers from where my parents lived, I went there, and since then I've been sitting, I think, practically every day. I felt at that time very much the need to reconnect my body and my mind. I feared that I would be in such kind of a very stressed on the edge stage, or where my neurotransmitters were completely mixed up. So the first years of practice, I was really practicing therapeutically. It helped me to see a bit more clearly in my own stress levels, and I learned gradually through concentration on posture and on breath to get in touch again with my own body and with reality as such. I didn't stop practicing. Even when I graduated, I already wanted to move to Africa, but seeing my health condition at the time, I was quite vulnerable, and my parents and other people, they advised me to, why don't you get some experience in the industry first, which is what I did. I immediately had a job because I graduated with very good results. And
if I may, Bart, would you say that the Zen, the meditation, it saved your life in a way?
Yeah, you can say that. Sure. I'm not sure I would have been able to overcome those challenges. And by the way, that's also what doctors told me at that. So it's thanks to the love and care and support from the various therapists and doctors that I was able to. Well, in the beginning, I needed a lot of medication to gradually build that off, and it actually has been a journey of 10 years between what I call the accident, which was basically the stupidest thing I ever did in my life, was swallowing 10 doses of LSD at once. Between that act and then 10 years later, when I was about to move to Africa with Apopo, then I didn't need medication anymore. But it is thanks to all that caring, compassionate support of psychotherapists and psychiatrists and coaches that I've been, my Zen teachers as well, that have been, you can say that indeed, that I live thanks to that. Yeah.
What would you describe as these people? What made you trust them? And that what characteristics did they have that you say, okay, I trust you, that I will follow you now, or that I listen to what you have to say?
You mean Zen teachers or
any?
because there's a
You
real
mentioned
clear-
Biet, your teacher from the art school. That's what made you following him or listening to him when you were talking about. He made us aware that what we did with our life was not so good.
Yeah, well, Mick was an inspiration to me and still is. Yeah, he's like he's probably my main mentor during the study times. He had a very strong social orientation.
Okay, yeah.
He was also a producer at that time he was involved in all kinds of social initiatives, and he was a producer of Mikpunt. I don't know if you remember that from our times. It was like a short, well, I don't know how frequent it was, but it was regularly on TV. A very short clip about some act of goodness in society, he inspired not only me, but many of us, including Christoph Cox, the current CEO of Apopo, with whom we were together in product design. He also was inspired by Mick. So it is this kind of grounding, I call it, that provided us with a kind of a platform of trust. We deeply trusted Mick also because, well, we weren't particularly the easiest guys to work with. I think we were like punks. We were kicking against establishment. There were like if you look at my promotion, we started with 93 students, I think, in this 5-year study of product ontwikkeling, and we belonged to a marginal group that was going hardcore, kicking against the establishment and challenging everything. Yet Mick was kind of a source of inspiration to us. He understood why we kicked against systemic injustices in society. And he was kind of a very engaged person who had like very practical solutions, and who through his productions on TV as well, basically he put those in the daylight, and that inspired so many people. It's interesting to looking back in history, that the grounding, I would say, the caring and compassionate values of one professor can inspire even the most marginal punks to actually lead a life of meaningful action.
Beautiful. Do you remember any other pivotal points in your life that you say, well, this was really a catalyzing person or event that made me grow?
Yeah, so many things. There have been quite a few pivotal points in my life. Well, meeting my Zen teacher, of course, but fast forwarding, because there's been so many things. We had the luck that through Antwerp University, the preliminary history of Apopo is one of first of all, very connected to my personal story. I had at that time, I lived from an invalidity bursary from the government. I had nothing to lose. I lived on like as a painter. I did artistic painting. I had worked for 1 year at Van Hol, who is currently going bankrupt. But I had left. I had left that company basically because of leadership issues. First of all, I got into a position way beyond my competency at that time. I just came from school, and I was number 2 in the design section there. So of course I couldn't handle that. But secondly, also because of the conflicts in that family. So I worked just under the brothers, and I was constantly exposed to that. To that demonstration of what family business can the troubles in that. So I left the industry. I lived on painting, and really it's at my second exhibition that Mick Billet came to see, and that's where he challenged me, like, hey, look at the real world problem, like you did in product design. It's a waste that you actually don't use your skills. And okay, then fast forwarding after several years of proposal writing, at some point I came to a scientific article where I learned that gerbils had been trained to detect explosives. And for me, one thing that came in my youth was, at the age of 9, I received a hamster, and feeling quite isolated in my bedroom, I had a lot of affection for that hamster, and I started breeding all kinds of rodents, actually, and sell them to pet shops. So for me, when reading that article, it was clear that, well, rodents could be trained. Through the links with Antwerp University and links with professors, in particular with Ron Verhagen at the Department of Evolutionary Biology, he suggested to to look into the behavior of the African giant pouched rat, which we did. And then through Antwerp University, we could actually settle in Sokoine University in Morogoro, Tanzania. And well, all these, I mean, looking in hindsight, looking at all these human interactions and all these voluntary contributions, it is so grateful to see how innovations are actually not the work of one person, but the work of a community of Belgian, American, Tanzanian, and so many nationalities of people working together to make that happen. Okay, you asked about pivotal points. A big mistake that I made, and I'm now fast forwarding 20 years. A big mistake that I made was over-identifying myself with the role of the guy who had that idea. And it made me like strongly attached to that image. On one side, it gave me also a lot of force, drive to because we needed to raise millions every year. By that time, we had already several hundreds of staff and programs in multiple countries. And I went beyond what is really, I would say, acceptable for personal sustainability. I remember a moment, I was in New York, and on the way back on the airplane, I had kind of a crisis. Normally, I would have continued to Tanzania for a strategic planning meeting with, at that time, 22 of our management, but I was burnt out. And I canceled my participation because of the doctor who told me like, "Hey Bart, now you're not traveling anymore." So grateful to see that meeting with 22 managers simply went on. I wasn't really needed anymore. So for me, in the same time, a big insight. Why don't you let go of this? And it is in this letting go, in trusting all the goodness of those people, highly motivated to bring this story further, saving lives. It was for me a kind of a grateful thing to, and basically I was forced to. My
Your body was telling you, was just saying stop.
Exactly. And in that situation, I learned a lot about the vulnerability of our human condition. And it also showed me that, because at that time, we had already won all kinds of awards, Ashoka, the Global Social Entrepreneurship Award of the World Economic Forum, Scholar Awards for Social Entrepreneurship, basically playing in that top league of that kind of limited world of systems changing efforts. At that time, I'm talking 20 years ago, right? But what I also saw and learned in these communities, where obviously we networked with other incredible change makers, that is that they all walked the very thin line between social impact and personal sustainability. And together with others in that sphere, we basically started emphasizing on this within these networks, that these cultures of heroism, where it was the one guy doing, creating the change, that this simply is an obsolete model, that actually societal change, sustainable societal change requires personal sustainability and well-being.
And that's where it often goes wrong with social entrepreneurs, that they don't have this balance anymore, or more driven by, I would say, ego, but I don't know how to explain it. But is that where it often goes wrong?
It does. Many, if not most, social entrepreneurs work on an issue that they have been victim from in their early childhood, or alternatively um, are enterprising because of something that was missing, some unhealed space,
Yeah.
maybe a lack of recognition, maybe, for instance, people working on financial inclusion who come from a background of poverty, people working on human trafficking who have been a victim of human trafficking themselves.
Yeah.
Very often there is this link, and that
Yeah.
power or the force working there of fighting an injustice because of having lived a particular injustice is incredibly strong. To the extent that if they don't really work on the healing needed to pursue their own destiny,
Yeah.
basically they risk to be prone to not only burnout but also create cultures in their organizations which are like sacrificial,
Yeah.
heroic cultures, and very often it leads to toxicity in the organizations. Many of these leaders, not only they they're not personally well, but they basically become toxic for their own organizations. Yeah. So there's a big learning there. Doing sustainably well in society really requires personal well-being. It's basically the vision of the well-being project, which then became this movement, which is now global, a global movement around creating a culture of care and compassion for those leaders who give the best of themselves for a better world, however fail on a personal, in their personal realm.
What does it take, you think? Because now you're giving workshops and on this inner well-being. What does it take, according to you, to have this point of recognition with those leaders, like a kind of aha moment? Should I have to change now because it's not going very well? Does it always have to be this moment of like you experience like a burnout, or can it be detected earlier, or can we help them in another way? Or can they be helped in another way?
Absolutely, it can be prevented. And just to be clear on this, the Wellbeing Project has been a collective in those networks. It's been a co-created project through Ashoka School, Schwab Foundation, Synergos, and a number of other social entrepreneurial networks, where it became clear that so many of these leaders came into serious personal issues.
Yeah.
More than half of the Ashoka Fellows are divorced, for instance. There is the rates of among the scholar awardees, which is a much more exclusive community, like almost half of them have left their leadership role in challenging ways in organizations. And what we see is that those leaders who do focus, who do prioritize even on their personal well-being, that not only they learn to listen in more deeply into their personal needs, but also, listening to their personal needs, which provides them more quality time with their dear ones, but also in their organizations, they become more capable of sharing their leadership in horizontal ways throughout the organization, which automatically moves away from the personal hero culture into a more collective leadership. And that's really what we need nowadays to tackle the most urgent, complex challenges that we are facing as a society.
What does it
Climate change, we need a collective approach.
What does it take, according to you, Bart, when you say often the leaders of social entrepreneurs, they are doing their thing because of a lack of a need that they had in the past in their childhood? What does it take for a person to, or for those persons, or for any person for that matter, to really open up and to face the issue or the wounds that they carry with them for so many years? What is it that opens up the heart or the space to get rid or to liberate yourself from the burden of your past?
Yeah, for many, it means it requires hitting the wall. Uh,
Mm.
yes, uh, and yeah, and getting into kind of a real crisis. Huh? But for well, there is a growing momentum here, and I think this is wonderful to see in society. Mental health is not a taboo anymore.
Yeah.
And many people realize that through preventative measures, and basically this is not rocket science, you know, they are very,
Yeah.
very basic things. Healthy sleep, regular healthy sleep, moving enough, not eating too much, and healthy, mostly vegetable-based diets, meaningful conversations, addressing our vulnerable human existence, and from that condition, really engaging in meaningful talks, and some kind of spiritual practice, which is not necessarily religious, but with spiritual I mean an inspiring, something that you do on your own in silence, simplicity. It can be yoga, it can be Zen, it can be mindfulness, it can be many things. It can be prayer for those people who believe. But something, it can be a walk in nature, but something really reconnecting with oneself. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so those things, people who
Yeah.
do those things, they simply are, and yeah, they're simply more resilient to continue living and pursue their what they are here for. So it very much
Yeah.
connects to noble purpose. Yeah.
It's beautiful how you describe this a spiritual practice, you know, just going deeper within yourself. Um, what I noticed is that it is not so easy for Western people because it seems we have no basic grounding on a spiritual life anymore, or good teachers, or um, and not just doing 1 hour of yoga, you know. But what is truly the essence of your practice? Where does it come from? Where is the history of the practice that you do? And how do you experience that with the Zen? Is it really something that helps you as well because it's so rooted, so deeply founded, and not something that you don't just sit for 1 hour.
Yeah. So first of all, I define spirituality as a leadership skill. Yeah?
Mm,
And the word spirituality is still kind of often taboo, but also that
yeah,
taboo is falling away. I'm involved on the board of directors of an organization called SPES, Spirituality and Economy and Society,
yeah,
which really looks at well, redefining spirituality really as
mm,
and the way we do it is we define spirituality as the capacity to be inspired and inspire others.
mm, yeah,
Okay, there's
beautiful.
many ways we can define spirituality, but in essence, I think this is where it touches leadership.
Yeah,
Because leaders, apart from needing like to be very integer people, and apart from their need to be hyper networking, being completely interconnected, what really makes leaders leaders is that they are inspiring others.
mm,
And leaders who are not capable to inspire, they don't stay lead, or they have a leadership style which risks to be toxic. Yeah. Yeah. Now, this inspiration, basically spirituality, literally comes from the Latin breath of life. It's in this kind of yeah, the miracle of breathing, I would say, and now I'm referring to Dogen Keegan, the founder of the Sotoshu Shumucho, the Zen tradition that I'm part of. He called the things we do, the magic things in society we do, are minor miracles, but the real miracle, the big miracle, is the fact of breathing. Yeah, interesting take. Yeah, often I see, well, there's like a growing group of people who do some kind of meditation, yoga, and in my case, that is Zen practice is a very direct way, which goes back to the Buddha sitting in meditation, and more about that maybe later. But I see many leaders actually engaging in some kind of practice, and it's wonderful to see how that benefits not only them personally, but also everybody around them. People who do that, they are more present. And with present, I mean embodied aware. They are more approachable to their colleagues, and they are capable of listening more deeply into what is needed. And yeah, that leads to a healthier, more connected working place where people also feel more connected, feel stronger belonging, which leads to more less staff turnover, and ultimately to more sustainability and impact of the work that they do in society.
Is that what you call or what you describe with the inner well-being? The project that you're getting involved into now, is that this inner well-being of being present and being connected with what you are now, and at the same time with the person that is in front of you?
Totally.
Is this inner well-being for you?
Yeah. Well, what is the definition of well-being? Hosts of researchers have tried to make an attempt. The best or the most a concise effort that has been there is through 150 scientists who put their heads together and to try to define well-being. And the best they came to, because it needs to be measurable, otherwise you can't talk about science, is that it's a dynamic balance between resources and challenges.
Okay.
So let's stick to the first word here. It's dynamic. We can all see that our levels of well-being are going up and down and so on. With the well-being project, which really is targeted at this world of social entrepreneurship, at systems change, we've learned big lessons about how leaders in these social change organizations, what they need to actually sustain and to be able to continue, grow personally. This well-being project, it continues to be a global movement. Like last year, we had like 5 summits around the world, and this year we will have 15 summits. So it's a growing, continuously growing movement, and it's amazing to see how this culture changes toward the culture of well-being. The newest initiative I'm doing currently with Vincent de Koning, Belgian, is called Innerpreneurs. It's for the moment still a small-scale initiative, innerpreneurs.org, where we bring those lessons learned from the social innovation space and bring them into mainstream entrepreneurial space, because we see that the same principles, the same mechanisms of personal sustainability and growth are valid for mainstream entrepreneurs as well. And with what do we mean with mainstream entrepreneurs? Are people who want to lead their life consciously. Most entrepreneurs start some kind of business because of they want to be either more independent, more free, or they look at they want to become wealthy. Those are the main drivers, and they find a suitable model that can give them those. Yeah? But on that path of entrepreneurship, that entrepreneurial path, they face all kinds of obstacles. And the abundance mindset that they start with initially risks to quickly turn into a scarcity mindset. Scarcity of resources, scarcity of time, scarcity of connection. They feel often very isolated and depleted in their energy. So what innerpreneurs does is actually, well, through various models. We do workshops in companies, we do retreats, we do also fire circles where entrepreneurs come together to share in a trusted circle about their challenges. The idea is to regain your abundance mindset and rakel up that inner fire that leads to societal change ultimately.
Beautiful.
You find more about that on our innerpreneurs.org website. And yeah, it's still a small scale initiative, but I'm very motivated for this because, well, from my own experience, and I see it all around. Entrepreneurs are incredibly powerful vectors of change in society.
Yeah.
The current challenges that we face as humanity to live sustainably together on this planet, they're urgent, they're complex, and they're many. Putting more resources won't help. Making things more efficient won't help. The only way, the Club of Rome is quite clear on this. The only way we can really get out of this mess is through an inner revolution. And yeah, that's why I think Innerpreneurs is such an important initiative.
Would you consider doing this with politicians?
Why not? Of course, and ultimately, I think everything is politics. Yeah? If we're talking about formal politics, well, there are a few that I'm in dialogue with. Some are inspired by Buddhism as well, and some call themselves Buddhist. It's an incredibly challenging project, I think. To find inner well-being and to install it in society, to see how much it is needed to focus on inner well-being. Basically, it's a hard sell. Yeah, it's a very tough thing to sell because everyone.
What is it? What is it? You know,
automatic thing would be, you have to do something in society. Well, no. And this is where there is this African thought leader, his name escapes me now, but the times are urgent. We need to slow down, and that is really a kind of.
That's a nice one. The times are urgent. We need to slow down.
His name escapes me now.
Yeah, it's okay. That's a beautiful one.
Bayo Komolafe, I think, is his name. Yeah. So this slowing down, this creating space and spaciousness is really needed, and to see clear. And that is where meditation can play a big role. You know, it's like your computer keyboard. What is the biggest key on your keyboard?
Space button.
That is indeed the space key. Try to write a text without using your space key. It gets completely clogged, not understandable, lacking meaning. You'll spend a lot of time figuring out what is written there. It is because of the spaces that we can see clear, that we can find meaning, that we can understand reality.
I love this metaphor that you just used, Bart, of the space bar.
It's not mine, by the way. I learned this from a Jesuit priest with whom I was on stage a couple of months ago in a forum.
Doesn't matter. We steal from everybody. So thank you. Is there, because we're almost at the end of the podcast, Bart, Is there anything that you would like to share? A last insight? You just gave a major one to me of the space bar, that you would like to share with the listeners on innerpreneurs and on innerpreneurship, and that you would say, yeah, just some a piece of inspiration.
Yeah. Well, maybe this one. So all this is actually about self-leadership. It's very tough to lead the world, but it may be equally tough to lead oneself in this complex world. Now, whether you are an entrepreneur, whether you are a politician, an artist, an activist, a podcast recorder, well, sorry to put that label on you and
Doesn't matter.
to diminish you in such a way. You are, of course, so much more than just a podcast recorder. But for any human being, really, in these modern complex times, the challenge is that we are constantly, through social media, through all of these stimuli coming at us, that we risk to get lost.
Yeah.
And the challenge is to find places where we can be meaningfully present, to provide ourselves that present of spaciousness. Yeah? And this is just one that I advise to many leaders. Just 3 conscious breaths. Just 3 conscious breaths in a row. That means breathing in and breathing fully out while taking on a graceful posture. Yeah? To sit, sitting in dignity, and just do 3 breaths, and we can do that together.
I was just going to propose to close the session. It would be great to do that together.
Yeah, but I need to tell you a bit more beforehand. If you do that, and that's what often I advise, put an alarm on your mobile phone. Make it a special sound. You can do that, this alarm with that particular sound, and do that 3 times in a day. For instance, in the morning at job, integrate it in your work time. You will work more efficiently. On the job, in the morning, at noon before you take a break, and maybe once more in the evening before you stop. At those regular intervals, just 3 times a day, 3 conscious breaths. These 9 conscious breaths in a day will change your life. It's as simple as that. Creating that spaciousness. And the condition is that you're really fully present in these 3 breaths. And that means that you really sit well, preferably the legs uncrossed, both feet well on the ground, sitting bones on your seat, feeling that support of the planet. And from the waist upwards, stretch the back, push the top of the head toward the sky, as if the entire planet was revolving around the axis of your spine. Yeah? That's how we should sit in such a moment. And then do nothing else but 3 conscious breaths. Let's do that together. And when breathing out, we go completely until the end, to allow for something new to come in. Yeah, that's just it. You know, through neuroplasticity, and this is now neuroscience, but still it's very powerful.
Absolutely.
Through neuroplasticity, just 3 conscious breaths like this have the power to create new neural connections. And that's how we can condition ourselves to lead a life in more harmony and well-being.
Thank you very much, Bart, for this truly fascinating conversation and inspiration that you gave to me, to the listener. And I also hope for the listener that this podcast has brought you a lot of inspiration, because for me, personal development and our growth are key elements in a changing world. And if you want to listen to more podcasts, please push the button and you will get notified. Thank you very much, Bart.
Thank you, Stan.
And it was an honor to have you on my show. Thank you.
Likewise. Thank you.
Thank you very much for listening to Studio Steen. If you want more inspiration, just go to my website studiosteen.com or go to the Spotify website, iTunes on inspirational leadership. You can also share this podcast with others who might benefit from listening to these inspirational talks. Thank you very much, great people.